with me, the road to political risk analysis or geopolitical analysis is a long one. I started in the 1990s teaching at the University of British Columbia. And at that time, there was external political risk. These are the things that, mining and forestry companies deal with when they have exploration permits and so on. But in Vancouver, in British Columbia at the time, there was a lot of internal political risk. And one of the things that was affecting the forest companies, the mining companies, ski resorts, tourism, and just real estate in particular, was what they called Aboriginal title. And it's a long story, and it involves a lot of cases in Australia and Canada and the US, but basically the bottom line was the entire province was up for grabs. Nobody quite knew how or who would own it, because there was Crown title, then there was Aboriginal title. And when the Asian financial crisis hit, I was sort of in the place, where you wanted to be. And from that point on, when I left academia, I just realized that there were so many different opportunities to do political risk or to be involved in the field that wasn't confined only to the academic world. There were banks, there was, think tanks, there were investment houses, and each had their own little spin on it. And so I went from doing that into what was called limited recourse financing, and I ended up in Latin America and parts of the Middle East doing risk analyses to those sorts of projects. And then I ended up working for some development agencies in Canada, and I was doing private sector development. And then around, I guess about the early 2000s, 2005, I was involved in a private equity group back in Vancouver, and one of the candidates for acquisition was the PRS group. And I had worked for them. I had seen some of their work when I was in Vancouver the first time, and I decided to buy them. And so that was in, I think, 2009, 2010. And from that point on, we've grown the company, and we've become much more international in our focus. Our client base is now about 80% outside the US, and we deal with everybody from the IMF to the World Bank, to the Federal Reserve, to the academic world, and transnational corporations, Google, Amazon. So everybody has the use of our data, everybody uses it in different ways, and so it's quite fascinating. There's a lot of shifting of gears, so that is the beginning of it. People ask this question all the time. The world has changed, they say. There's Israel, there's the invasion of Ukraine and all these sorts of things. And that's true. There's much more focus on geopolitical risk analysis than ever before. But PRS covers 141 countries, and we update our analysis and our ratings every month. So we're on it. And we have certain types of ratings. I think there's 22 or 23 political risk ratings, or metrics rather, that we use on a monthly basis. We monitor them daily, but we publish the results every month. We look at financial conditions and we look at economics. So within those metrics, within those ways of evaluating risk, we're always looking ahead. Okay, so we have what are called quasi-type 2 errors. So we look at 1 year and 5 year forecasts in addition to the present time. So situations like the Ukraine or Israel, they don't really catch us by surprise because it's already built into the ratings. And the one thing that we do quite often is talk to our clients. We have analysts all obviously over the world, but we do talk to our clients. And this was really important when the invasion of Ukraine occurred, because most of the press and the State Department and so on, the idea was Putin would be mad to invade, and this was not, something that he would do. And whether that was just, for media consumption, which was probably the case, or something that was based on, a lack of understanding, we began talking to a lot of our clients in the shipping industry. And we noticed that some of their logistics were changing. They were telling us this in the Sea of Azov, because they had experienced, a few years before when, Crimea was annexed and so on. And so they're very attuned to what people are saying. And sometimes that's a lot different than what you would read in the newspaper or from Google. And so we began to adjust our scorings to say, all right, well, there will be some cross-border conflict. There are some satellite countries in that area, from Moldova to, Norway and so on, that could be affected. So all of these ratings began to change. And there's other examples as well. And the interesting thing to note was about 3 months after the invasion, well, let's back up. Let's say maybe 2 months after the invasion, one of the Dutch investment houses that buys our data couldn't believe that our ratings hadn't changed. They said, why are they no different this month than they were last month in the Ukraine or Russia? And I said, well, let's go back 6 months. What was happening? So there's a reflective component to it. There's like a predictive component. And there was one study that was done, I mean, there's many studies, but one study was done out of Duke University in collaboration with Columbia and NYU, I believe, where they took a look at our ratings. And long story short, they found a really significant predictive element to them, where they began to deteriorate, that is to say, become more risky, about 3 to 6 months before the event is, say, reported in the financial press, or there's an OPIC claim or something like that. So the long story short is that we cover these countries all the time. Nothing really catches us by surprise. There is the odd event that will be, somewhat surprising. But in terms of the overall trajectory of risk in a country, we cover them all, and the methodology allows us to focus on the nuances and the way in which different components of political risk interact with each other. AI, I think it's terrific. I think it's a huge tool that can allow us to do research as academics in a variety of different ways, saves a lot of time. It's a great stepping off point, but there's two things. One thing is you have to worry about what goes in. And a lot of the companies, I think, and I don't know for sure, but a lot of the companies I've spoken to that are doing work in this field are relying on these kind of web scraping technologies where they just pull all kinds of different pieces of information in. That's okay. But we don't know if it's been vetted. We don't know whether it's been written under a tight deadline. If you're looking at headlines or keywords, sometimes they're inflammatory because you need clicks. So you have to be very careful of that. But the other point is, too, you can't replace the human being. You really can't. And so just like in the medical field or any other fields that's starting to use now AI, it's a great tool, it's a great resource, it speeds up the analysis, it reveals sorts of relationships that would take you months to find in a matter of seconds, but you really need, a lot of experience to say, okay, what are we going to do with this data and how it's going to be used? And I think that's the key.